What if I told you the most powerful weapon in the world isn't nuclear bombs, it's money? And not just any money, the US dollar. Every time a country buys oil anywhere on Earth, they're forced to use it. But this wasn't always the case. So how did the United States turn oil into global financial control? And why are some countries now trying to break free? This is the rise of the petrodollar. The story of the petrodollar begins long before the term itself existed. It starts in the early 20th century, when oil replaced coal as the dominant energy source powering industrial economies. Oil was more efficient, easier to transport, and essential for emerging technologies like automobiles, airplanes, and mechanized warfare. As nations realized this, oil quickly transformed from a commodity into a strategic asset. During the early decades, oil production was largely controlled by a handful of Western companies, often referred to as the Seven Sisters. These firms operated across the Middle East, Latin America, and parts of Asia, extracting crude oil at low cost and selling it globally. At this stage, oil pricing was not yet standardized globally in a single currency, but the United States was already becoming a dominant player due to its massive production capacity. By the time World War II ended, the global balance of power had shifted dramatically. The United States emerged not only as a military superpower, but also as an economic giant. Its industrial output was unmatched, and its currency, the dollar, was rapidly gaining international trust. This laid the groundwork for a financial system that would soon reshape global trade. In 1944, representatives from major Allied nations met in New Hampshire to design a new international monetary system. The result was the Bretton Woods system, which pegged global currencies to the US dollar, while the dollar itself was backed by gold. This effectively made the dollar the center of global finance. Countries needed dollars to trade internationally, and the United States became the anchor of the global economy. At the same time, oil demand surged. Europe needed energy to rebuild after the war, and developing nations were beginning to industrialize. The Middle East, rich in vast oil reserves, became increasingly important. American and British companies secured long-term agreements with countries in the region, ensuring steady supply while maintaining significant control over production and pricing. However, this system had an inherent vulnerability. The United States had promised to exchange dollars for gold on demand, but as global trade expanded, more dollars circulated internationally than the US could realistically back with gold reserves. This imbalance would eventually trigger a crisis. By the late 1960s, the strain on the Bretton Woods system became evident. Countries began to question whether the United States could honor its gold commitments. Confidence in the dollar started to weaken, and the entire financial structure faced potential collapse. At this critical moment, oil and currency would intersect in a way that reshaped the global economy. The stage was set for a new system, one that would no longer rely on gold, but instead on something far more essential to modern civilization: energy. What followed would become one of the most influential financial arrangements in history, quietly placing the United States at the center of global oil trade and economic power. By the early 1970s, the global financial system was under immense pressure. The promise that the US dollar could be exchanged for gold at a fixed rate had become increasingly difficult to maintain. The United States had spent heavily on domestic programs and overseas military engagements, flooding the world with dollars. As more countries accumulated these dollars, they began to doubt whether the U.S. had enough gold reserves to honor its commitments. Foreign governments started demanding gold in exchange for their dollar holdings. This triggered a steady outflow of gold from U.S. reserves. The situation became unsustainable. If it continued, the United States risked losing its gold stock entirely, which would destroy confidence in the dollar and destabilize the global economy. In 1971, a decisive move was made. The U.S. government announced that it would no longer convert dollars into gold. This effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. Overnight, the dollar became a fiat currency, meaning its value was no longer tied to a physical commodity, but instead relied on trust and economic strength. This decision sent shockwaves through global markets. Without gold backing, there was no clear reason for other countries to continue holding large amounts of dollars. The world needed a new mechanism to maintain demand for the U.S. currency. Without it, the dollar could lose its status as the dominant global reserve currency. At the same time, another crisis was unfolding. Oil-producing nations were becoming increasingly assertive about controlling their resources. They wanted higher prices and greater influence over the global energy market. This shift in power created both a challenge and an opportunity for the United States. The key problem was clear. How could the U.S. ensure that countries around the world would still need dollars? The answer would come from the most critical resource of the modern era: oil. If oil could be tied directly to the dollar, then every nation needing energy would also need dollars. This would create a continuous global demand for the U.S. currency.
This idea was not just about economics, it was about geopolitical strategy. By linking oil to the dollar, the United States could maintain its financial dominance even without gold backing. It would effectively replace gold with oil as the foundation of its monetary influence. But implementing this idea required careful negotiation. Oil-producing countries, particularly those in the Middle East, needed to agree to price their oil exclusively in dollars. In return, they would receive security guarantees, economic partnerships, and access to U.S. markets. This was the beginning of a new era. The collapse of the gold standard did not weaken the dollar as many had feared. Instead, it paved the way for a more powerful and flexible system, a system where the value of money was no longer tied to a metal buried underground, but to the lifeblood of modern economies flowing through pipelines and tankers across the world. The transformation of the global financial system did not happen by accident. It was the result of deliberate strategy and high-stakes diplomacy. After abandoning the gold standard, the United States needed a new anchor for the dollar. That anchor would come from oil, but only if key producers agreed to cooperate. The most important partner in this strategy was Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter at the time. Its vast reserves and influence over other oil-producing nations made it a pivotal player. Securing an agreement with Saudi Arabia would set the precedent for the rest of the world. Negotiations took place quietly but carried enormous implications. The arrangement was straightforward yet powerful. Saudi Arabia would price all its oil exports exclusively in U.S. dollars. In return, the United States would provide military protection, support for the Saudi government, and access to advanced technology and investment opportunities. This agreement was not limited to bilateral benefits. It quickly expanded into a broader system involving other oil-producing countries. Through diplomatic pressure and economic incentives, the United States encouraged members of the global oil network to adopt the same pricing structure. The result was a new standard. Oil would be bought and sold in dollars. This created an automatic demand for the U.S. currency. Any country needing oil, whether in Europe, Asia, or Africa, had to first obtain dollars. This ensured a constant flow of demand, regardless of the state of the U.S. economy. At the same time, oil exporting countries accumulated large amounts of dollars from their sales. These revenues, often referred to as petrodollars, did not remain idle. They were recycled back into the global financial system, often through investments in U.S. government bonds, banks, and financial markets.
This recycling process further strengthened the U.S. economy. It provided a steady source of funding for government spending and helped maintain low interest rates. In effect, the system allowed the United States to finance its deficits more easily than other nations. The implications were profound. By tying the dollar to oil, the United States created a self-reinforcing cycle of demand and investment. The more the world relied on oil, the more it relied on dollars, and the more dollars were used, the stronger the U.S. financial position became. This arrangement also gave the United States significant leverage in global affairs. Control over the currency used in oil transactions meant influence over international trade and finance. It allowed the U.S. to impose economic sanctions, shape monetary policy, and maintain a central role in global markets. What emerged was not just a financial system, but a strategic framework that linked energy, currency, and power. The petrodollar system became a cornerstone of modern geopolitics, quietly shaping the economic landscape for decades to come. Once the petrodollar system was firmly established, its effects began to ripple across the global economy. The most immediate impact was the creation of constant demand for the US dollar. Every nation that needed oil, which was essentially every industrializing country, had to acquire dollars to pay for it. This requirement embedded the dollar deeply into international trade. Central banks around the world started holding large reserves of dollars to ensure they could meet their energy needs. This further strengthened the currency's status as the global reserve. Unlike other currencies, the dollar was not just used for trade between the United States and its partners. It became the standard medium for transactions between entirely different countries. This widespread adoption gave the United States a unique advantage. It could print money at relatively low cost, while other nations had to work, export goods, or borrow to obtain dollars. This dynamic created an imbalance that favored the U.S. economy. It allowed higher levels of spending without immediate consequences that other countries might face.
Another major effect was on global financial markets. Petrodollars earned by oil-exporting nations were often deposited in Western banks or invested in U.S. assets. This influx of capital increased liquidity, supported stock markets, and helped finance government deficits. The cycle reinforced itself. Oil generated dollars, and those dollars flowed back into the system that created them. At the same time, the system also introduced vulnerabilities. Countries that depended heavily on oil imports became exposed to fluctuations in both oil prices and the value of the dollar. When oil prices rose, their demand for dollars increased, often leading to economic strain. This dependency made many economies sensitive to decisions made in Washington and by oil-producing nations. The United States also gained a powerful geopolitical tool. Because most global transactions passed through dollar-based systems, it could monitor and influence financial flows. Economic sanctions became a highly effective means of exerting pressure. By restricting access to the dollar system, the U.S. could isolate countries from global trade.
However, this dominance was not without criticism. Some nations viewed the system as inherently unequal, arguing that it gave the United States disproportionate power. They began exploring alternatives, such as trading in other currencies or developing independent financial systems. Despite these efforts, the petrodollar system proved remarkably resilient. Its strength lay in its network effect. The more countries used the dollar, the more practical it became for others to do the same. Breaking away required not just individual action, but coordinated global change, which was difficult to achieve. Over time, the system became so ingrained that it was often taken for granted. Yet beneath the surface, it continued to shape economic policies, influence international relations, and determine the flow of wealth around the world. The petrodollar was not just a financial mechanism, it was a foundation of modern global order. Despite its strength, the petrodollar system has never been completely unchallenged. Over the decades, various countries and alliances have attempted to reduce their dependence on the US dollar, particularly in the context of oil trade. These efforts have been driven by both economic and political motivations. One major concern for many nations is vulnerability. Relying on a single currency controlled by another country creates risk.
If access to that currency is restricted, it can disrupt trade, weaken economies, and limit sovereignty. This became especially clear when economic sanctions were used as a tool of foreign policy. Countries targeted by such measures found themselves effectively cut off from global financial systems. In response, some nations began exploring alternatives. They considered pricing oil in other currencies, such as the euro or emerging market currencies. Others invested in building independent payment systems to bypass traditional dollar-based networks. These initiatives aimed to create a more multipolar financial system where no single currency held overwhelming dominance. At the same time, global energy markets were evolving. New oil producers emerged, and technological advances such as shale extraction increased supply. Renewable energy sources also began to gain traction, gradually reducing the world's reliance on oil. While oil remained crucial, its absolute dominance was no longer guaranteed. Another factor was the rise of large emerging economies. Countries with growing economic power sought greater influence over global finance. They questioned why the dollar should remain the primary currency for trade, especially when economic activity was becoming more distributed across regions. Digital currencies and financial technologies added another layer of complexity. Innovations in payment systems opened the possibility of conducting international transactions without relying on traditional banking infrastructure. While still developing, these technologies hinted at a future where the petrodollar might face serious competition. However, transitioning away from the petrodollar system is not simple. The existing framework is deeply embedded in global institutions, contracts, and financial practices. Changing it would require significant coordination and trust among nations, which is difficult to achieve in a competitive geopolitical environment. Moreover, the United States continues to hold key advantages. Its financial markets are among the largest and most liquid in the world. Investors view them as relatively stable, making them attractive destinations for capital. This confidence reinforces the role of the dollar, even as alternatives are explored. The result is a system under pressure but not collapse. The petrodollar remains dominant, but its future is increasingly uncertain. As global dynamics shift, the balance of power in energy and finance may gradually evolve, setting the stage for a new chapter in the story of global economics. Looking ahead, the future of the petrodollar system will depend on how global energy and financial landscapes continue to evolve. While the system has endured for decades, it is now facing a convergence of changes that could redefine its role in the world economy. One of the most significant factors is the transition toward alternative energy. As countries invest in renewable sources, such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, the centrality of oil may gradually decline. If oil becomes less dominant, the mechanism that ties global demand to the dollar could weaken. This does not mean an immediate collapse, but it suggests a slow shift over time. At the same time, geopolitical dynamics are becoming more complex. Alliances are shifting, and economic power is spreading across multiple regions. Some countries are actively pursuing agreements to trade energy in their own currencies. These moves are often small and incremental, but they signal a desire to reduce reliance on the dollar. Technological innovation is another driving force. Digital payment systems, blockchain-based currencies, and central bank digital currencies are creating new ways to conduct international trade. These tools could bypass traditional financial channels, potentially reducing the influence of any single currency. However, the resilience of the petrodollar should not be underestimated. Its strength lies in decades of integration into global systems. Contracts, pricing mechanisms, and financial institutions are all structured around it. Replacing such a deeply rooted system would require not just alternatives, but superior alternatives that offer equal or greater stability and trust. The United States also retains significant structural advantages. Its economy remains one of the largest in the world, and its financial markets continue to attract global investment. These factors support the ongoing demand for the dollar, even beyond oil transactions. Another important consideration is trust. Global financial systems rely heavily on confidence. The dollar has built a reputation over time as a reliable medium for trade and investment. Any competing system would need to establish similar levels of trust, which is a gradual and uncertain process. In the end, the future is likely to be defined not by a sudden replacement, but by gradual diversification. The dollar may remain dominant, but its share of global transactions could decline as other currencies and systems gain traction. This would lead to a more balanced and multipolar financial environment. The rise of the petrodollar was a strategic response to a moment of crisis. It transformed a potential weakness into a lasting source of strength. Now, as the world changes once again, the system faces a new test. Whether it adapts, evolves, or eventually gives way to something new will shape the next era of global economic power.
The petrodollar didn't just change oil markets, it reshaped global power itself. From wars to alliances to economic dominance, it all traces back to one simple rule: control the currency, control the world. But now, that system is starting to crack, and the next shift could change everything. If you want to understand how money, power, and global strategy really work, subscribe and stay ahead, because the next financial empire is already rising.